All right, I think I got this all figured out. Howdy, I'm Julene, and today I just kind of wanted to go through some tips for my fellow hypermobile people that like to go to Pilates class. So I want to start out by saying I'm painting with a really broad strokes when I say hypermobile. Essentially, if someone's ever called you a pretzel or a Gumby or thinks you're really flexible and it doesn't take any work, it feels like, for that to happen, then maybe you're hypermobile. So let's start out with some of the more obvious things, at least in my mind, which is first of all, you should reduce your range of motion. Um, Yes, you can make huge circles with your arm, but are you able to control the rest of your body in the process? It usually takes more time, you're moving slower. Um, and overall, it's one of those things I've noticed, colloquially, I guess, about hypermobile people is that we really enjoy both the kind of like the traction or the pull feeling in our joints or that like compression feeling in our joints. And there's a lot of opportunities, especially if you're using equipment, for you to push your joints in ways that might feel good at the time, but tend to leave your joints feeling not so hot afterwards, maybe a couple hours after class. One of the things about being hypermobile is that you tend to have a great mobility but not so great body mechanics in the process. So you can make this movement happen, but you can't control it happening. It's not a muscular movement, it's driven to a point by where you're able to roll in your joint. So let's move from this reducing the range of motion to the other thing I think is pretty important, which is decreasing your load. Again, if you're using equipment, sometimes it feels nice to feel kind of smushed in your spine or in your hips as you're pressing in and out during footwork, but we're not trying to be compressed. We're not trying to do anything beyond use these springs to assist you in finding the correct muscles to complete a movement. So, in short, I like to think of it as take the opportunity to just use these like smaller, nuanced movements where you're not fighting to make the motion happen so that you can start tuning into how you make the motion happen, at least as you start getting familiar with Pilates. So I guess what it goes along with this is that, regardless of range of motion or spring tension, your form means more than anything else. I can do some really advanced exercises right out the gate. That actually is not very good for me. Strange, which is why your teachers want you to, warm up before class or as we like lead into the body of class with footwork and, hands and straps, or maybe it's, I don't know, the knee series. Anyway, um, so because your form means more as a hypermobile person, maybe you prioritize moving with your breath. So maybe you inhale and exhale. I don't want you to, pass out. So you're not hyperventilating here, but you're definitely adding a little bit more, again, intention with the movement versus just going through the motions. When people cue you to have a completely straight arm or a completely straight leg, from any hypermobile people, you can straighten your arm or you can hyper straighten your arm, and it kind of makes it look like your elbow goes like backwards in space. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe instead of straightening to that point, which is really pushing like that end range of your joint motion, you put like a micro bend. It's a baby bend. We're not talking like a big one. If this is my one arm out in front of me and I just put that baby amount of bend, it's just a little tiny bend so that I'm really working through the muscles of my arms and my shoulder, both in my chest and in the back of my armpit, like my serratus, instead of locking out my elbows or locking out my knees to make something happen. Um, when you're in motion, especially if you have any kind of wrist stuff, we want to build some strength. Generally speaking, you're going to be keeping the back of your hand, especially when you're using equipment, in alignment with your forearm. So if you were laying down on the mat and you're taking your hand all the way down to the mat, you're not going to bend at the wrist to pull it down. You're going to keep that forearm and your back of your hand in alignment as you pull your arm down to the mat. Let's see here. What are some other thoughts? Oh, instead of when you plank, whether you plank from your toes or you plank from your knees, perhaps instead of putting your hands down flat, you go for a fist. That way you can kind of feel when you're smashing down into the arms. Or you can always go for kind of a forearm plank, still thinking that you want to keep your elbow roughly in connection with your shoulder. Um, let's see here. Oh, obviously, speaking of shoulders, generally speaking, for hypermobile shoulders, you don't want your shoulders to be running away from you or pulled so far back your ribs have to push forward when you are completing any kind of motion. I'm saying generally speaking because obviously there are exercises where this doesn't apply. But overall, I would say that, modify things or skip things if they're not for you that day. Like it's not a competition. You can't get a gold star for being good at Pilates. So you might as well just do the things that are best for your body and not worry about how it looks compared to your neighbor if you're in a classroom setting. Let's see here. When it comes to hypermobiles, I think we're down to like two more thoughts, maybe, which is that first of all, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And this is a really hard one for me to learn, at least, because there's a lot of things I can do, but if I'm not doing them with correct form, I'm not doing my body any service, I guess, to some extent. So, you know, take your time, pay attention to how things feel, um, make sure you're warmed up. If something feels bad, pay attention to that. It's important to know. Um, and then the last piece of advice, and I guess this is just for, anyone doing Pilates, not just, hypermobile people, is embrace the fact that this is a practice. And so you're only going to have progress. You're never going to do it perfectly. Nobody does every exercise perfectly. People who think they do every exercise perfectly probably don't, and no one tells them, and that's okay. You're moving your body. You should feel good. And doing things differently than the way your brain has kind of automatically wired itself to move your arm like you were going to hug a tree or push your hand out or keep your pelvis in one position while moving your legs around. This takes time. I was talking to a retired chronic pain, like rehab nurse recently, and the way she phrased it to me is that for every one time you did it wrong, like out in life, it takes at least 5 times on top of that of doing it right. So that's a lot of reps of doing things to retrain. That's a lot of reps of doing things to retrain your brain, your body, their connection on how you want these moves to happen. So, be nice to yourself. You will get there. And again, like, I don't want you to feel like it's a big deal because there's lots of people that are hypermobile that come to Pilates in no small part because we like the push pull joint feeling. And it can look really good from, I guess, like a technical standpoint if you were thinking of this like dance, but Pilates isn't dance, at least not the way that I teach it or the way that I think about it. And so it is about what it's doing for you, not what it looks like for everyone else around you. And with that, I will get off my tiny soapbox that obviously requires me to sit on the floor. And anyway, I'm Julene. I teach Pilates. You're welcome to come take a class with me if you'd like. You can find me at j.pilates.com. No, wait. j.pilatesstudio.com. I was so close, you guys. This is like my first live, so cut me some slack. Anyway, see you next time. Bye.